Hello manga and anime lovers, I'm Branch Miner 1, you can call me Branch, and today I'm going to be talking about How to Become Ordinary Season 2, Episode 6, I believe? Crap, I forgot to double check. I always forget the numbers. Anyways, that's not important right now. What's important is what happened this episode. This may be one of the shortest discussions I've done on this series, and not for the reasons you might think. Well, actually, I don't know what you're thinking, so that's for you to decide. Regardless, we got half a conclusion this episode. The other half, I assume, will be the next episode. Because in this episode, Koboto finally... I don't know what he did, to be honest. That's for next episode, I think, to find out. Fireman was caught. The arsonist was caught. I assume thanks to Koboto's trap, because it certainly wasn't anything that Urino did. Because it turns out that Urino, this entire time, was pursuing Osanai. He thought she was the culprit. Which, okay, I kind of suspected that. Slightly. I suspected a couple of things. I suspected that Urino knew the culprit, and that was why he was trying so hard to catch them. And I think I threw out the possibility that he thought it was Osanai before. But whether or not I did, it makes sense why he was acting so strange with her and so plastic, so wooden, whenever she was talking to him, especially in the past couple of episodes. I will say, however, that this entire episode is dedicated to tearing down that possibility thoroughly, extremely thoroughly. Unfortunately, I never really considered Osanai being the culprit a possibility in the first place. It was always an obvious red herring to me. In fact, it was so obvious that I never thought that the show would bring it up, aside from Koboto mentioning it offhand. But even he dismissed it. So it's kind of like... This entire episode is basically to tear down Urino's point of view and his determination. So, to put it into perspective, he thought that Osanai stole the hammer and then placed hammer marks around all the fire areas, which apparently that's what he was referring to last episode. It wasn't just that one pole. It was apparently every fire, or at least most of them. It was kind of vague. Had hammer marks, which, by the way, I was so thankful that the hammer was brought up again, because that has been in the back of my mind for the entirety of my discussions after that first episode. I just wanted to know what the hammer was for. I still don't know, by the way. The fact that Osanai used a mallet, not a hammer, a mallet, to break open the shed door to save the gasoline, or I guess to save the people in the house next to the shed from a gasoline explosion, was pretty satisfying, especially because I thought that she stole the hammer to combat the arsonist, but apparently not. Regardless, Koboto and Osanai's reunion was pretty nice. It's finally good to see them back together and in their element again. Because Koboto was basically holding himself back the entire time he was with the brown-haired girl, and Osanai... I have no idea what Osanai was doing. I'm not going to lie. I have no idea, no clue. Then again, I assume that's for next episode, so I'll try not to bring that up this episode. But her main goal was to catch the culprit. I'm interested to see why and how. I assume it has something to do with the previous case because of the van's involvement. And something with the Nita, the student counselor instructor, probably has something to do with it, either directly or indirectly as well. But that's neither really here nor there for this episode. Because, oh my goodness, I have never seen such a thorough takedown of someone's ego before. And I don't mean just their pride. I mean literally their entire sense of self. Poor Urino at the end of this episode is basically a shell of a person, because he has put his everything into trying to catch Osanai and prove that she was the culprit. And when he finally thought he succeeded, it turns out that he was completely wrong, and nothing he did was on the mark. And it's very interesting. I'm interested to see Osanai go at Urino like this, because she's usually not this kind of a person. Like, obviously, she's a slight bit of a psychopath, as we've seen last season, but she's not someone to openly antagonize another person for no reason. Now, obviously, Urino accused her of being an arsonist very thoroughly, so I suppose she was a little miffed about that. But still, I don't understand her motives here. I can't read her at all. Like the previous season, it was really easy to read her, especially once you understood what was going on, and maybe I will understand more after Koboto undoubtedly explains everything in the next episode. But I don't understand why she wants to catch firemen and why she was so against Urino doing it. Well, actually, I kind of do. Now that I just said that. Urino's a pretty terrible detective, so that's probably why she was against him doing it. But still, the fact that she didn't think that Urino was suspecting her is really interesting because she's usually, I don't know, attentive to those details, to the suspicions of other people and how they think. I guess in this instance, she's so used to Koboto that she didn't even consider the possibility that Urino would consider her a possible perpetrator. Regardless, it is over between them in a much more explosive way than Koboto's breakup. Oh my goodness. I mean, granted, they had basically broken up, 7 months ago because Urino was suspecting her and she was never in check in the relationship in the first place. So really, there was nothing to go off of. Like I said at the start of the season, these relationships were doomed from the very start because no one was putting any sort of heart into them. And it was all performative in the end. Just like how Otsunai and Koboto were performing the entire of the first season, trying to be ordinary. And it's very interesting to hear Otsunai specifically... No, wait, not Otsunai. Wrong. To hear Kengo specifically tell Koboto that he was never ordinary in this episode. And I think that we are finally coming to the conclusion for both characters that them trying to become ordinary is actually making them worse off than just being their normal selves. You know, the obvious conclusion, but perhaps one that is not so obvious when you're the person in the topic of the conversation. But, I mean, really, I don't have much more to say because a lot of it was debunking Osanai's involvement to clues that Urino had that we didn't even know about. I mean, yes, I remember the train scene, but it was hard because the visuals showed a train by Urino when it wasn't actually there. This is where the visuals of the show can be a bit confusing. They try to visualize the characters' emotions and imagination way too clearly. Like, they do this in Monogatari too, where they'll show specific visuals to highlight what the character is thinking. Like, they'll basically put them in a different place. But in Monogatari, it's very abstract. So often you can tell what is real and what's not. In this show, you can't really unless you're paying attention. So I thought that Urino was actually standing in front of a train in that episode when he was talking to Osanai over the phone in the park. When it turns out, no, he was not in front of a train. He just heard a train on her end, which I suppose makes sense in hindsight. Unfortunately, a problem with the show is that a lot of it is hard to catch. So when you come to an episode like this, where they're basically saying, haha, it was a red herring, I thought, well, yeah, obviously it was a red herring. I didn't catch any of the clues that would point to it not being a red herring. So it kind of just is like a, yeah, I knew this kind of episode. I don't know. It's probably better on a rewatch, I will say. But this is where the style of the series really hinders the storytelling. I can imagine in a light novel format, you would hear the fact, like Urino in his head, or the narrator would explain what he was experiencing at the park that time, that he was hearing the train over Osanai's end of the phone. And then the reader would gradually, throughout the months, start suspecting Osanai more and more until they were almost sure that she was the culprit, especially when she shows up with the hammer at the end. Unfortunately, I did not get any of that, so I was never convinced that she was the culprit. In fact, I was convinced that somebody she knew or someone that Urino knew was the culprit. And that still might be the case, because we still haven't figured out who Fireman is, and I feel like it won't be a named character that we know, but it will be somebody who we know by proxy. Like, we know their status, maybe. Like Urino's relative, or some famous guy in the firehouse, or Nita's relative. I don't know. I really can't speculate anymore because I don't have the information. And if it was given, I did not catch it because this show can be very confusing at times. It's also kind of interesting to hear Kengo's thoughts on Koboto for like the first time. Although he might have said something in season 1 that I forget. But Kengo is basically a guy who goes along with the flow just to help people. But that doesn't mean, just because he's friendly with you does not mean that he likes you. And apparently he really does not like Koboto very much, even though he helps him out a lot. I think that's not exactly true, but I think he might be saying that he does not like Koboto in the state that he currently is in, where Koboto is basically being a super fake person and running around in circles to try and achieve this status of ordinary that is unachievable. And I think Kengo's tired of it. That's why he straight up tells Koboto that he was never ordinary and cannot be ordinary. And it's interesting to hear that Koboto, basically he knows that, especially after he tried to go out with a quote-unquote ordinary person. He's realized the fact that being ordinary is a sham and you shouldn't do it. That's the lesson for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Do not try to be ordinary, because as soon as you try to be somebody that you're not, everything goes wrong. I'm sure we all have various levels of experience in this certain topic. But anyways, I've been yapping on way too long. I really don't have anything to theorize about for the next episode, aside from what I've already said, because it's basically set in stone what's going to happen, unless the show pulls a 180 and we don't get the explanation, in which case I will start the next review very, very angry. All right, but that's all I have to say today. If you want to watch the next one, it'll be out, I don't know. I have no idea. I upload these whenever I feel like it. Thanks for watching this far if you have, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully. So long.